11 Alive Weather Impact Team. It is 6:30 on this Friday night. We want to do this extended weather update for you right now, as we know many of you are seeking information about these storms that are rolling through our area right now. And we have multiple pockets of heavy rain and thunder and lightning now pushing through our area. We had this one that came through the city a little while ago that is now over on the east side with very heavy rain, intense lightning with these storms over on the east side. We've been watching the winds ramping up with this as well, between 40 and 50 miles an hour. As of right now, we don't have any severe thunderstorm warnings in effect. If we see some of those winds getting up to 58 miles an hour or greater, then the National Weather Service would issue a severe thunderstorm warning out of this. But as of right now, so far, no severe thunderstorm warnings. But again, heavy rain, thunder, and lightning over on the east side. We're in a little bit of a break inside the perimeter right now over the downtown area. But then we're watching this band that is over to the west of us that also has some really heavy rain and thunder and lightning with it as well. That still has to move through the city. Now, we do think that thanks to round one moving through, that the storms over on the west side will weaken a little bit as they push through our area, as it's moving into some rain-cooled air and a little bit more stable air as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hang with you guys for the next 15-20 minutes. Just tracking these storms and getting a closer look at these storms as they move through, and show you these areas where they are now and where they are going to be headed here going through the next 15 or 20 minutes. Here you can see over the city of Atlanta, there's that break in the downtown area, but we still have these storms there on the north side that are moving through the north end of the perimeter, the east end of the perimeter, and then there's that main area of rain, that very heavy stuff now, leaving Redan but pushing through Conyers. We had some heavy rain in Snellville. That continues to push on over to the east here. So for you folks in Covington, Jersey, Social Circle, Monroe there in Walton County, Campton in Walton County, get ready, because this is moving your way. The main thing you're going to be experiencing will be those pockets of heavy rain, thunder, and lightning. And again, those winds around 40 to 50 miles an hour. I'm looking to see if we have a new update here from the National Weather Service. Nothing new has come in right now, which is a good sign that they're not issuing any warnings out of this or anything. But let me take you up to this there in Lawrenceville. Here you see 85 North moving up through Gwinnett County. There's the split to 85 and 985, where we just had this heavy rain push through Duluth earlier, heavy rain in Lawrenceville and Snellville. Now to the east of them is where we have that heaviest rain right now. But this is where we have, just look at all that thunder and lightning closing in on Auburn. You already have some rain in Auburn right now, but the really heavy stuff is just about to push on into those areas there as well. I'll move on up to the north here, and you can kind of see these areas that we're watching also at that 85 and 985 split right here, the heavy rain and thunder and lightning. This is moving into Brazelton with heavy rain there, pushing up 985 into areas from North Gwinnett into Hall County, up around Oakwood and Gainesville. Look at that heavy rain that's coming down in those areas right now. And of course, a lot of that lightning with it too. And then as we widen out a little bit, going up into Banks County here, excuse me, near Lula, it is calming down a little bit more up in White County. We had some really heavy rain earlier, just a little while ago up in White County. Now that's calming down from Mossy Creek, Cleveland, up into Helen, also back into Lumpkin County and Dahlonega, calming down a little bit more. Still some light rain coming down in the Suches area as well. But there's that main region that we're watching. Now this was really heavy earlier on the north side as it was moving through Cherokee County, Pickens County, and Dawson County, but it's a little bit lighter now. We still have some stray lightning strikes though in those areas of Pickens County, and then the bulk of this is over to the east of that area into Gainesville, and it has pushed over Lake Lanier. Now here is the second wave of rain over on the west side right now, still very heavy there with that thunder and lightning. So this is more pressing there over parts of Douglas County around Douglasville, moving into South Fulton, also these areas into the northern parts of Coweta County where we have that really heavy rain. So this is closing in. So you've got this rain at Forest Park right now with thunder and lightning there on the south end of the perimeter. There in the northern parts of Clayton County. That's moving down 75. It'll be over 675 in a little bit. So that's ahead of this main part right here that's pushing into South Fulton. That's going to be moving in here on the west side of the perimeter in just a little while. So the west side of the perimeter and inside the city of Atlanta, we already had one round of rain that moved through. Now we've got this next one that's going to be pushing in. This also has that heavy rain and thunder and lightning there in association with it. And let me widen out just one more time, just so you can get a good overview of these areas that we are watching right now. And again, in northeast Alabama, other areas of rain with thunder and lightning intensifying there. I do think that as these cross over 59 to move into northwest Georgia, they should weaken just a little bit since we already have this part of our atmosphere already kind of worked over here just a little bit. All right, so I'm going to put this into live mode. I want to go in specifically into some of these areas, and let's start with this on the west side because that is what is moving our way. What I want to do, I want to concentrate on this cluster right here from South Cobb and West Cobb into these areas of Douglas County and also into South Fulton County, there between Palmetto and Douglasville. I want to do a lightning count on these storms right now. As they are over on the west side, they'll be pushing into the city of Atlanta. I'm going to take this into Atlanta to include that area of rain and lightning on the south side too. So inside this red box, we have 175 lightning strikes in the past 15 minutes. That's still a pretty intense storm here. Even though it's not classified as severe, there's just a lot of electricity there with it. And even though this is moving into an area that has already had rain and rain-cooled air coming in, we expect these to weaken a little bit, but they are still holding together pretty well, about to move into the city here on the west side of the perimeter for the next wave of rain as that pushes over to the east. And that includes this area here on the south side there around Forest Park. That bit of lightning looks impressive there as well. Let me take you out a little bit more over on the east side to that main area of rain that we have been watching there that has moved in over Lawrenceville, up towards Sugar Hill, Brazelton, and Gainesville. And I'm going to just kind of query just that one part. I'm not going to include all of that on the west side. So I'm just going to put this box here. You see where I'm drawing that there on the east side of the perimeter, covering this cluster of storms. And just in this red box alone, we have 439 lightning strikes in the past 15 minutes. And a big cluster of that right now is what I was showing you in Gwinnett County, into Barrow County, parts of Jackson County, moving into Jackson County there, and parts of Southern Hall County with that really heavy rain. And that even goes down toward the Conyers area where we're seeing some of that lightning too. So this is a lot of lightning here with these storms moving on over to the east. And then again, still a lot of these showers there to the north as well. Not as much lightning there pushing through, but still some of that heavier rain coming through as well. So we showed you those two specific areas here. Let me see, we're getting a new special weather statement in for Barrow County, Gwinnett County, Hall, and Jackson County. That is just the area that I was looking at just a moment ago. Let me see what the National Weather Service is saying about this right now. And we're, again, talking about winds of about 40 to 50 miles an hour with the heaviest rain. So this is saying strong thunderstorm impacting portions of Barrow, Gwinnett, Walton, South Central Hall County, southwestern Jackson County through 7:15. Strong thunderstorm over Bold Springs or near Winder, moving east at 15 miles an hour. 40 to 50 mile an hour winds. So again, this is below what we would classify as a severe storm. 40 to 50 mile per hour winds, pea-sized hail, and frequent cloud to ground lightning. Again, moving to the east at about 15 miles an hour. So I'm going to zoom in. Well, let me show you the lightning count here. I got distracted there a little bit by that new update. I want to do the lightning count just from West Georgia, including Cleburne and Randolph County over into Alabama, moving over to the east of us. And from those two systems, remember we did the lightning count with this and then the lightning count with this. But now both of those together showing 617 lightning strikes in the past 15 minutes for all of Metro Atlanta and all of North Georgia. That doesn't count this lightning back here in Alabama, but this, except it does count this over in Randolph County. Of course, they're in our viewing area here. So if you're watching there, just know we have those storms there firing up in Randolph County. That's just a little bit to the west of Heard County, there south of Carrollton. So a lot of lightning with these storms. And so lightning isn't the only factor here for the National Weather Service to determine whether or not something is severe. Again, in order to have a severe storm, you'd have to have winds of 58 miles an hour or greater, or hail an inch in diameter or larger in order for a storm to be classified as severe. So even though these are intense, and very active out there with all of the lightning and the heavy rain and those winds, again 40 to 50 miles an hour, you're just not seeing the crawls running on your screen because they are not classified as severe. These are going to keep moving over to the east, and we do think that once these push through, it's going to be quieter during the evening hours tonight. Here is how this looks in motion here. We had this band come through, and really that first initial area of rain was really just kind of firing up ahead of the main one out to the west. But notice how that really ramped up more over on the east side. And that's where we saw the winds kicking up even more. And now we just, I'm going to zoom into this again, just this area of lightning here from northern Rockdale County over into Lawrenceville, into the Beaufort area, or out of Beaufort there, from Lawrenceville to Snellville, pushing into Barrow County there at Winder, and about to move into Jefferson. So what I'm going to do here, I mentioned these storms are moving to the east at about 15 to 20 miles an hour. I'm going to do a track just on this leading edge. Well, let me do this right here north of Monroe. All right, going at about 15 miles an hour. That takes it into Campton at 6:45, Gratis at 6:58. Eastville at 7:34. So this is going to be moving over to the east into those areas. Let me just do a couple of spots here. Here's that leading edge there at Winder. Again, moving about 15 to 20 miles an hour. That'll take it into Statham at 7:09, into Cleveland Station at 7:30. Let me make sure I just didn't get a new update in here from the Weather Service. Okay, still that one for Jackson County and Hall and those areas that I'm tracking for you right now. But again, into Attica at about 7:32. Now, let me clear this out and I'll show you here up around Jefferson, this part of the storm here, that leading edge moving to the east at about 15 miles an hour, takes it into Jefferson at 7:05. Right now it is 6:42. So we're talking in about 20 minutes or less. This is going to be bearing down on you in Jefferson at 7:05, Brockton at 7:22, and then Nicholson at 7:36. And then let me track more there to the north. And you can see what we're going to be watching there. This other cluster, very impressive there around Gainesville. So that leading edge here, I'll track it from here, going to the north and east at about 16 miles an hour. Takes it into Maysville at 7:12 and then into Homer at 7:27. So a lot of heavy rain and thunder and lightning, and these clusters are very impressive there with all of the lightning, heavy rain they have in association with them too, and really impacting a lot of people out there right now. Let's go back over to the west side. And you can see these storms. Okay, so these are now closing in on the city. It does look like, as I mentioned here, in fact, let me put this into motion and see if we can kind of see that, where you see this lightning count, all the lightning really ramping up over Douglas County. Still a good bit of that in the northern part of Douglas County, right there along I-20 and the southwestern parts of Cobb County. But you can kind of see there, as this continues moving eastward, we've already had this one round of rain push through Atlanta earlier. Rain-cooled air there, trying to stabilize the atmosphere a little bit more. So as this is coming into the city, you can kind of see, I mean, there's still a lot of lightning with it, but it does look like this lightning count is coming down a little bit now as this is moving into the city. That's already been kind of worked over by some of those showers and storms that have been pushing through the area. But again, it's still going to send more rain in here, coming in from the west side. And then after this pushes through, we think things will be calming down a little bit, even though we still have some of that rain there in northwest Georgia, thunder and lightning between Gadsden and Fort Payne. So for you folks over in Rome, Floyd County, Chattooga County, we're keeping an eye on these for you as these will be crossing over the line. most likely they are going to weaken too, because you had some really heavy rain and rain-cooled air in those areas of northwest Georgia just a little while as well. So here's a look at some of our tower cams. I'll put this full for you so you can see this a little bit better. This is our tower cam in Atlanta, our Georgia Tech tower cam, looking eastward toward the Midtown. Downtown's this way, Midtown is there, but this is looking over toward the east. We still have a good coverage of clouds there, but in the city, we're in a little bit of a break right now. This is in Decatur. Earlier, this camera was just shrouded over with rain and the visibility was really low there as these storms here. Still, we've got some good clouds there. You can see some raindrops right here, so it is still raining over in Decatur right now, but at least the visibility is okay. And then this is our tower cam over in DeKalb County at Arizona Avenue, looking over toward the west. And you can see that little bit of a break that we have over the city, but then farther to the west, out past I-20, this is looking beyond there, the city. That is that next round of rain there on the west side. You can see the dark clouds with it, heavy rain. We are most likely going to see some flashes of lightning out of that too. That still has to come into our area. Now, we do think this is going to be settling down during the evening hours, but during the day tomorrow, we're going to have another hot day. We have one more hot day in store here with temperatures up into the mid-90s again, up to about 94 degrees tomorrow. But again, we're going to see scattered showers developing, and the Storm Prediction Center is placing much of metro Atlanta here and areas north and east of us and east and south and east of us in a level 1 of 5 risk for the potential that some of those storms could turn severe. I think they would be more of the isolated variety of the severe storms, but again, watching for those pockets of heavy rain, thunder, and lightning there, and of course, the potential for some strong winds too. So here's the forecast track. I'm going to show you the forecast track, and then I'm going to go back to radar here over at the desk, and we'll still examine some of those showers and storms that are moving through. But this is the coverage we have over our area right now with that very heavy rain. Again, more of that up into northeast Georgia, and watching any of these storms here back into Alabama that are still going to move through. Watch how, boom, it goes on over to the east. Our air cooler and more stable here back behind these waves of rain that are moving in. So really, I'm thinking 9, 10 o'clock, it's going to be a lot quieter here with just mainly clouds around and more calming conditions here. And then we start the day tomorrow with sunshine mixing in with a few clouds. At lunchtime, really a good bit of sunshine, but temperatures heating up again to about 94 in the afternoon, and there we go again. That's where we see some of these scattered showers developing. I don't think we're going to see as much of a widespread coverage of rain as what we're seeing out there right now. It just depends on if these storms kind of form and gel together and make larger storms or bigger areas of rain, but this is something we're watching for tomorrow. A couple of those showers lingering into the evening. Then the big changes coming in on Saturday. Now I want you to notice something here. The arrows on the map indicating those winds coming out of the east and northeast. And that's what we often call a wedge, or some cold air damming coming in. It comes into the east, it gets kind of blocked by the mountains, and it funnels in some of that cooler air into our area. So on Saturday, we're going to see temperatures holding generally in the lower 80s. There may be some spots to get into the mid 80s here on Saturday, but with that overrunning moisture here coming in over that cooler layer of, shallow layer of air there at the surface, we're going to see some scattered showers off and on. It's not going to rain all day, but here we see at noontime on Saturday on the north side a pretty good coverage of rain around, maybe dying off there in the afternoon, maybe a few more showers developing in the evening and into Sunday morning. Still that easterly flow, but scattered showers here with us. We're not overly concerned about a big time thunderstorm threat because that air is going to be a little more stable. But here we go to around lunchtime, that easterly flow. We may not even hit 80 degrees here on your Sunday afternoon. We're calling for a high in the upper 70s, but there you can see what we're going to be watching. So there's the rain chance, 40% here on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and then a 30% chance for rain on Monday and Tuesday. The models have wide ranges here of what to expect with the rainfall over the next 7 days. You can see the American model showing in Atlanta about 1.7 inches of rain possible, Athens 1.5, 1.6 in Covington, but then look at the European model on the right-hand side, showing some of those heavier amounts that'll be moving in. It's predicting almost 3 inches of rain in Atlanta, and areas over on the east side more than 3. It's even showing Eatonton with more than 5 inches of rain. So we think that's a little overboard, but again, it's just showing the differences in those models and the potential for some of those pockets of heavy rain to continue to move on through. Back now to live radar, and again, you can see these areas that we're watching. The lightning numbers, or the lightning is just kind of calculating here as these storms are over to the east of us. I know it doesn't look like there's as much now, but it's just now starting to build up as we just came back to this radar image. But there again is that heavier rain pushing through the city of Atlanta. There's the leading edge there of that bit that's on the east side from Gainesville, stretching down. This is just to the west of Athens right now, but that's going through those areas of Banks County, Jackson County. There's Banks County here, Jackson County here, pushing in toward Commerce, that leading edge in areas of Barrow County. Heavy rain over Winder, pushing through, about to move in right there, the northern parts of Oconee County, western parts of Clark County. You can see this in Walton County, moving into parts of Newton County. Still some rain lingering there in Gwinnett County, not as strong as it was earlier, but still some pockets of heavy rain on the west side. The next wave coming in on the west side of the perimeter, and it does look like it is weakening a little bit. Still heavy rain, still some thunder and lightning, but not as strong as that first line that came through just a little while ago. And here you see these showers there. This is just to the south of the airport, with some of that heavier rain that continues to push through those areas right around Forest Park right now, East Point, Riverdale, getting that heavier rain on the south end of the perimeter towards Stockbridge, over, again, leading over toward Conyers. There's that batch of lightning right here around Riverdale. Not as much lightning now back from Douglas County into areas there trying to get into the west side of the perimeter. Let me do another lightning count on this right now. And I know, let's see if this is populating yet with the new numbers here, where we've got 490 lightning strikes. So earlier it was more than 500. Now we're showing a little bit less than 500 lightning strikes in a 15-minute period. And the symbols are just kind of populating on here since we left radar just a little while ago. So I know it doesn't look like as much, but the lightning numbers, though, are still coming in pretty impressive. I do think, though, we're going to continue to see these lightning numbers coming down as this continues moving on over to the east, just because it is moving into, especially this part, is moving into more stable air and cooler air pushing through. In fact, speaking of that, I want to show you the temperatures that we have. I kind of skipped over that there a second ago. Here's a look at the temperatures in our area thanks to this rain-cooled air. Before I overlay these on here, notice the orange color where the rain hasn't come in yet. That's the hotter air. The yellow color back here shows where the rain has already pushed through. Now we'll overlay the temperatures on here, and you'll be able to see these temperatures. Now at 5 o'clock we had temperatures in the 90s. And now we have dropped to 82 in Atlanta thanks to the rain-cooled air that came through. Look at Marietta at 75, 73 in Lawrenceville, rain-cooled air in Gainesville, 72 there, 72 in Canton, 77 in Carrollton. Peachtree City, Thomaston, you haven't gotten in on that heavy rain yet. At least these are the 6 o'clock numbers coming in. You're seeing some of the rain coming in now that you're starting to cool down. But 6 o'clock temperatures, 91 in Peachtree City, 90 in Thomaston, 88 in Covington, and Athens 88. So this just goes to show you what that rain-cooled air does as it comes in, and it does drop those temperatures. And not only dropping the temperatures, but that cooler air becomes a little more stable. And not, again, the heat helps to really bubble up these storms coming in or feed these storms pushing in. So that's what's kind of happening with this second round of rain over on the west side. It is moving into a little more cooler and stable air because of the first round that came through, and that's why those storms seem to be weakening there just a little bit. But for you folks in Peachtree City, still 91, Thomaston 90, Covington again there at 88. Really warm for you, but once this rain pushes through, you're going to see those temperatures falling down pretty quickly as well. Let me show you the heat index too. because of course that's giving us, helping us there a little bit. 95 is the heat index in Athens. 100 is the heat index in Peachtree City. Plenty of hot air around and humidity too. But there you see those 70s there on the north side with the heat index. Even though the humidity level cranked up and you're probably feeling like the steam out there, at least the heat index levels are a little bit lower for you, thanks again to that rain-cooled air, even though the humidity is really cranking up. So here's another look. The lightning data is kind of populating on here a little bit better now, and you can still see those clusters over on the east side. This is where we really have more of that intense lightning coming out of Gwinnett County, through Walton County, there, Barrow County. So from really Covington here in Newton County, parts of Rockdale, moving through Walton County. This is approaching Monroe right now. The heavy rain's about to move into your area. East Gwinnett, east of Lawrenceville, getting over closer to Winder, there in Barrow County, also Jackson County, pushing up into Hall County. This is that area with the more intense lightning and also that heavy rain that is pushing through those areas too there to the east of us. So Commerce, get ready. Athens, get ready, as this heavy rain is about to push into western parts of Clark County, about to move into the city of Athens. And then here again is this over on the west side where we have this heavy rain. This is pushing into the city too. On the west side of the perimeter to East Point, also down on the south side here around the airport, continuing to move on through those spots as well. So I'm going to put this on full screen really quick. I'm going to change some of our tower cams. Y'all keep looking at this into motion here as we're watching these storms moving through. I need to go to our other source. I want to change some of our tower cams so you guys can see some different areas that we're watching. I'm specifically going to call up the airport for you so you can see these showers and storms that continue to move in over the airport, and we still have those delays also at Hartsfield-Jackson that have been around 75 minutes. So really intense rain coming through there, and not only over the airport, but also near the airport where this heavy rain continues to push on through. And of course, we've got the thunder and lightning in those areas as well. So heavy rain, you can see that moving through the city of Atlanta. We've got two waves that are pushing through, and those waves that are over on the west side are showing signs of weakening as they push into the city. And then also over to the east of us, more of that heavy rain and thunder and lightning continues to push through as well, with, again, some winds of 30 to at times maybe 40 to 50 miles an hour, staying just below what we would classify as severe criteria for these storms rolling on through. So here's another look here as we have this up full screen. I'm going to call up some of these tower cams so you can see them a little bit better. Just getting reports of a 31-mile-per-hour wind in Jefferson, Georgia, over there in parts of Jackson County. Here is a look right now at Hartsfield-Jackson. This is showing up on your screen here where, yeah, you can you can't even see the tower anymore right now because of the rain coming down so hard and the thunder and lightning in association with that. The visibility is much lower now. Here is a look over in Decatur where things are looking really okay there. Actually, this is Athens, where we're looking toward the west. And in western Clark County, you can see those dark clouds there just beyond that church steeple there at the top right-hand side of your screen. That is the next band of rain that's going to be moving in from western Clark County, pushing into the city of Athens into downtown. So that's going to be over downtown in just a little bit. And then speaking of downtown, this is Atlanta, looking at a live view here over the city as we're watching this next wave of rain that is going to be pushing through the city of Atlanta. But we do think it will be weaker about the time that it gets here. So again, another live view of what we're watching here on radar as these storms continue to push through our area here. Heavier rain over the city right now, the heaviest stuff with all of that intense lightning over on the east side, about to move into Athens. So that is the main threat there over on the east side, that heavy rain, thunder, and lightning continuing to push on through. We do think that once this system pushes through, things will start calming down tonight. I'm going to keep an eye on this on the south side. We've got an outflow boundary developing there. We can see some storms developing along that, more on the south side. So I'm going to keep an eye on that for you. as well as those storms over on the east side pushing in toward the Athens area. Now, what I'm going to do, we're going to put the radar loops up for you starting at 7 o'clock so you can still keep an eye on these storms that are moving through our area. I will come back on and do additional live reports if necessary here during the evening hours. Our next scheduled update here on 11 Alive Plus and Weather Impact 24/7 is going to be at 9 o'clock, but I may do some other reports before then, depending on what I see as we track these storms moving through. But here's what you see on the 7-day, another hot day tomorrow at 94, and then the cooler air coming in for the weekend. 82 Saturday, 79 for a high on Sunday. We're still going to be dodging some of those showers around though, and then lower 80s back up to the mid 80s going toward the middle and end of the week, still holding on to some of those scattered showers with those rain chances that will be at about 30%. So keep it right here on 11 Alive Plus, and then Weather Impact 24/7 will have the radar stream on that so you can keep an eye on those radar loops as these rain showers and storms move through our area. Thanks for watching. We'll have more updates later on. Good evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Chris Holcomb from the 11 Alive Weather Impact Team. Things are finally calming down out there after we have been tracking multiple areas of rain and storms that have been pushing through our area with very heavy rain, thunder and lightning, and even some winds. Now, out of all of that came through earlier, we never really had any severe thunderstorm warnings. These storms were just below what we would classify as severe criteria. But even with them, we still had winds between 40 and 50 miles an hour at times. And the lightning was really the big story with this. There were clusters of really intense lightning with a lot of these storms. The good news is a lot of the stronger storms have pushed to the east and also down to the south of us. We still have a few lingering showers around here and there, but nothing really too strong. The strongest of that activity is already pushing away from our area. But as you can see, we had these storms that rolled through Atlanta really late afternoon into the evening hours. I did a special stream at 6:30 tonight from 6:30 to 7, tracking those storms as they were pushing through. That's when we were seeing all of that lightning. And then look at this on the east side, how they really kind of pulsed up there with even more intense lightning moving through those areas of DeKalb County, Rockdale County, Walton County, Clark County. Had storms that really fired up there a little bit earlier and then started to kind of move on out, but still plenty of rain, thunder, and lightning with that. Gwinnett County had a lot of lightning earlier. We're getting some sporadic reports from some of the emergency managers around the metro area and in North Georgia of some lightning fires. There were at least 3 lightning fires in Jackson County. We had one in Commerce, one in Brazelton. There was 2 homes that caught on fire. Also a commercial fire in Jackson County as well on the Valentine Parkway area. There was some of those showers. We also had some sporadic reports of some trees down in spots, but then a lot of tree debris on some of the roads there to the north and east of the metro area as those storms continue to push away. We've also been watching some of those storms on the south side too, still hanging out in Pike, Lamar County, and Upson County, but that's all going to be pushing away and things are going to be a lot quieter for us for the rest of the evening hours, even though we still have a couple lingering showers around. In Atlanta, we're drying out, but look up to the north and east, you can still see a couple of those showers around, just mainly light showers, but we had our share of rain that came through here a little bit earlier today. Also, here's a look over to the east of us. There's that light rain that I'm talking about up into parts of areas of Gwinnett County, up into parts of Hall County, Forsyth County, around Lake Lanier. A few of those lighter showers. A little more moderate rain still holding on in Walton County and Monroe. Still some moderate rain in Athens, but it was really heavy earlier. You can just see all of that lightning, but that is all pushing to the east of us now. Still tracking some of these showers on the south side. I mentioned Pike, Lamar County. We still have this lightning there near Barnesville, moving into parts of Monroe County. Upson County still getting some of that heavier rain there. A little bit of thunder and lightning with that coming out of Meriwether County there into the western parts of Upson County, just west of the Thomaston area. That's all pushing to the south too. Some of these storms still firing up there around Macon, into areas of Jasper County there. Still seeing some of that rain, thunder, and lightning, a little bit of the lightning there in areas of Putnam County, some of that in Baldwin County near the Milledgeville area too. So pushing away and calming down a little bit as well. In Troup County, things are starting to calm down. Still some pockets of heavy rain, but that's pushing down to the south, getting closer to Columbus. And in far north Georgia, more areas are drying out. A little bit of light rain still there in northwest Georgia from Walker County into Murray County, Whitfield County, Catoosa County, seeing some of that lighter rain moving through. But improving weather really for the rest of the nighttime hours. We just have to get this last little bit out of these areas of Lamar County and Upson County and also out of Putnam County there, pushing away. And then these will be exiting our viewing area or those counties that we are responsible for. Now our Doppler radar can estimate how much rain has fallen. Now for some reason it's not showing up here, but we did. I'll go ahead and plot some of the data on where you can see some areas like over in Gwinnett County, County near Lawrenceville. Doppler radar estimates of around a little bit more than 3 inches of rain. Also some spots in Hall County there in the northern parts of, there we go, it just populated there. In the northern parts of Forsyth County, a lot of these areas where you see the reds and purples is where we've seen rain totals there between 2 and 3 inches. There's even some spots down here in South DeKalb picking up almost 3 inches of rain. Also up into areas of Pickens County, about 3.5 inches of rain over in Floyd County. Just some isolated spots there. Not everybody picked up that much rain, but it's not out of the question to see some of those rainfall totals, 2, 3, and even 3+ inches of rain. Compare that to spots where you see in the green there in parts of southern Bartow County, only about 1/4 inch of rain. There have been some other areas over on the east with the green color indicating some lighter rainfall amounts there too. But the good news, it's all moving out. Things are going to be quieter for us for the rest of the nighttime hours, and nothing else major is moving our way tonight. But we still are staying in that same air mass where it is going to be warm again tomorrow. We're talking about highs near 94. We have the humidity around, and we have the potential again for some additional scattered showers to move into our area. Here's a look at our tower cam. Now, the airport has had some issues tonight. They had a ground stop earlier that held on for a while. The ground stop is over, but now the departure delays, it's still taking a while for those to resolve themselves. We are still seeing departure delays of around 2 hours at Hartsfield-Jackson. So if you have a plan, if you have a flight that's going out, you'll want to check that flight before you head down to the airport. It might save you a little time if your flight's going to be delayed for a while. But just know that there are still delays. Things are improving now. We saw an airplane there just there on the runway and on the taxiway. So there is some movement. There's one right there. Did that one just land, or is that one about to take off? I think that one's just now landing there. So at least there is some action there at Hartsfield-Jackson. But after a really long ground stop, now those departure delays are holding on. And again, we'll just have to wait for them to resolve themselves. Here's a live view in Athens. We were keeping an eye on this a little bit earlier. That was one of the last areas where we have our tower cam. We were still seeing some of that heavy rain. Now the roads are still wet. There's still some light rain around, but they're not excuse me, not seeing the storms in Athens anymore, but still some of those lingering showers around. And then this is our tower cam here from DeKalb County at Arizona Avenue looking toward the west, where the sun went down around 8:38ish, I believe tonight was sunset, and we're seeing some of the breaks in the clouds. Earlier, we were seeing a lot of action on this tower cam as waves of rain were moving through the area. Now, we made it up to 95 degrees for a high temperature today before the rain came in. And then when the rain came in, we watched those temperatures fall. And right now, we're still holding in the 70s. So that yellow color you see really over most of our area where we see more of these 70s around, like even down in Thomaston, 73 right now, 77 here, generally low and mid 70s around. That is thanks to the rain-cooled air that came in a little bit earlier tonight. That came in tonight, and that cooled us off a good bit. Now, take a look at the almanac. We did hit 95 for a high today. Our low was 74. That 95 is 5 degrees above the average. Now, we did get some good rain coming in over Hartsfield-Jackson earlier. In fact, a little bit more than 1.33 inches of rain came through. So our deficit now is back down a little bit. We're about just under 1 inch below where we should be in rainfall for the year. So this is a good rainfall that we had at Hartsfield-Jackson that's helping us out with those official readings. Now, I want you to look at this. This was interesting today. That morning low, mild in the 70s early this morning. Temperatures rising quickly. We still did not hit 90 at lunchtime, but it was after lunch when we got up to 91 degrees there at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. We bumped up to 95. We had some breaks in the clouds to let some sunshine come through to give us that bump. Then 92 at 4 and 5. Then that rain came in and hit Hartsfield-Jackson. It went to 82 and then 76 really quickly. So from 92 at 5 to 76 at 7 o'clock, and that's all thanks to the rain-cooled air coming in that did actually move into Hartsfield-Jackson. Now, we do not have a heat advisory for the metro Atlanta area tomorrow. We do think we're going to stay below heat advisory criteria, even though we're going to see highs around 94, most likely heat index values around 100 or so. But I do think we'll stay below 105, which is the criteria for a heat advisory to be issued. However, We do have to watch some counties to the east of us, like over at Putnam County, over near Lake Oconee, right here, into areas of Jasper County, Morgan County, and Greene County. Those counties down to the south and east, all those counties in orange that you see there, those are the counties that are included in a heat advisory for tomorrow. Those will be the spots where we can see that heat index value getting up to around 105. Now, the other thing we have to watch with the heat and humidity, we're going to have another chance for some showers and storms to develop. And with that, we will have to watch the potential that a few of those could turn severe. The main threats would be pockets of heavy rain, thunder and lightning, and some gusty winds. Some of the winds tomorrow in some of these individual storms could get to severe limits, up to 58 miles an hour or greater. So we'll have to watch that. And again, when you're talking about a level 1 of 5 risk, even though we expect to see some pretty good showers and storms developing tomorrow, there won't be a lot of them turning severe, but there is a chance that some of them will turn severe. So really Atlanta, north and eastward, eastward and southeastward of the metro area, that is where we have that level 1 of 5 risk. Then on Saturday, the level 1 risk pushes down to the south. We're going to have more stable air here in our area thanks to a shift in the wind and a cold front that's going to move in. We're going to have more of an easterly flow pushing here into our area, and that'll cool us off a little bit and give us a little more stable air. So that's why that severe weather risk is kind of going away. So 76 to start early in the morning. By 9, we're already up to 80. 1 o'clock, 90 degrees, getting up to 94 in the afternoon. And it'll be in those afternoon and evening hours when we see that little better chance for some of those scattered showers to roll on in. Here's a look at what we're watching tonight. Now, this is pretty similar to what I just showed you on the radar imagery with those showers and storms that are down to the south of us, continuing to push away, drying out a little bit over North Georgia, still the clouds that are hanging out. But you see here through the nighttime hours, all of that's going to be pushing away. And tomorrow morning, in these areas that had some rain, there's a lot of ground moisture there. We could see some patchy fog developing to start the day in the morning, a few of those clouds around, and then that should break up. And we might even see a good bit of sunshine at lunchtime tomorrow. Not a bad lunchtime hour, but then here we go into the afternoon. Heating, humidity still with us. Scattered showers are going to be firing up. We could have some thunder and lightning with those. And then on Saturday, this is the day where we're going to see some changes. This is the day when we're going to see some relief with some cooler air that's going to be moving in. And this is that east wind that I was telling you about. You see these arrows coming out of the north and east? That's going to be behind a front that moves our way. It's going to stall out down to the south. Now, where it stalls will be a determining factor on which areas can see a better chance for some rain around and which areas will stay warmer. The places that don't see that northeasterly flow will stay on the warmer side. But we think that it's going to move south of Atlanta and continue moving south, so that east wind brings in the cooler air. But we'll also see that moisture still riding in from the west, riding up over that shallow layer of cooler air at the surface. And we'll see some showers here Saturday at lunchtime on the north side. In the afternoon, maybe breaking up a little bit. Into the evening hours, fewer showers around, we're hoping there. And then into Sunday, still that easterly flow. We may see some additional showers kind of developing there on Sunday. And it's not going to be raining the entire weekend. We're just talking about some sporadic showers moving through here and there. But it's also going to be more than just the afternoon and evening variety of showers. So that's going to be with us on Sunday. Easterly flow continues. We may not even make it up to 80 degrees on Sunday. We can see a high of only about 79 degrees. Here's a look at the rain chances. 40% chance Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. 30% chance here on Monday as well as on Tuesday. Models showing varying amounts of different rain potential. Almost 2 inches possible over the next 7 days here in the metro area, according to the American model. The European model showing a lot more, maybe 2.5 to 3 inches of rain. So we'll have to see how those models all kind of come together there. And here's a look at your high temperatures. Another hot day Friday. Then the relief comes. 82 for a high Saturday, 79 on Sunday. And then we'll see temperatures around 82 Monday and around 83 degrees here on your Tuesday. So here's a look at that 7-day outlook where you see that hot day, Friday, 94, 40% chance for showers. Saturday, cooler, 82 degrees, or should we say not as hot. Still a 40% chance for some showers around. Then Sunday's high, only 79 degrees. How about that? With a 40% chance for showers. We do go back to the lower 80s on Monday and Tuesday, 30% chance for showers, and then mid 80s Wednesday and Thursday, still with that 30% chance for showers. So we can't quite get rid of those rain chances, but they will be just a little bit up and down over through the period. Temperatures, though, staying below the average. The average high for this time of year is 90 degrees. So we'll be staying below average through that extended period once we get past tomorrow, because tomorrow is going to be there in the mid-90s. Thanks for watching this extended update here on 11 Alive Plus and Weather Impact 24/7. We'll have more updates for you throughout the day, as well as what to expect heading into the weekend. We'll have another update for you coming up tonight at 11 o'clock.